So we are going to talk about how to write objectives. When you write your objectives for the assignment, it will be performance objectives, which is an overarching objective. But we're going to talk about how to do that, and we'll also talk about what enabling objectives are. Enabling objectives, again, will just um, support a performance objective, and you won't have to write any of those for the assignment. So we will distinguish between the two types of instructional objectives and identify the three components of a performance objective. All right, so again, I just want to remind you about Bloom's taxonomy and the cognitive domain. You will use this to write your objectives. So there are the 6 levels, knowledge being a lower level and evaluation being a higher level. You want to write objectives that fit into different categories. You want to write them all in the lower level. You want to write some in higher level. Um, higher level cognitive domains for your objectives. All right, so performance objectives. The objectives should communicate 3 characteristics. What should the learner be able to do? So a performance. So what will they be able to perform or do? And then under what conditions should the learner be able to do that performance? So a condition statement. And then how well the performance should be completed, or a criterion statement, or how it's going to be evaluated. All right, so their objectives should be stated in specific terms. They should call for specific performance behavior, so it should be very clear about what is expected, and then worded in terms of what the student will do, not what the teacher should do. So, what will the student do? All right, so be stated with only one performance or behavior per objective. All right, you don't want to put multiple performances in. Stick to one overarching performance that you want for that lesson. Again, you will write a performance objective, one performance objective for each lesson. So the assignment I asked for performance objectives, that means it's 4 objectives, overarching objectives for 4 different lessons. So one performance objective per lesson. And then, of course, your objectives need to be measurable, and that's where that criterion statement comes in. It's not good criteria if it can't be measured, so make sure that it's measurable. All right, so again, performance, that's tied to your 3 domains from Bloom's taxonomy: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. We're going to just focus on the cognitive domain, so deal with acquisition of facts, knowledge, information, and concepts, rather than your attitudes or skills. We could write performance objectives that work for affective and psychomotor domains, but we're just going to look at cognitive domain for this course. All right, so your condition statement then. So our performance statement is what will they be able to do? The condition statement is under what conditions will they do it. This is where you're going to list what equipment they might need, supplies, materials that they're given to work with, materials to which a student is denied access, so things that they can't use, environment in which performance must be demonstrated, so in the lab or the shop or outside. Information the student may be provided that will direct this action in a certain way. So they'll have access to a list of action verbs for Bloom's taxonomy, something like that. Specification of time in which the performance should be accomplished, so within 5 minutes or something like that could be a condition as well. And then the criterion statement is how it's going to be measured, or the criteria that's going to be followed to know that they achieved that performance. So accuracy within the tolerance limits, speed. They need to be able to run a welding bead in less than 5 seconds. I don't know. That's a weird criteria, but something you could do. Percent or number to be achieved. So we expect them to get 75% of the questions correct on the exam. Reference to other material, which identifies specific criteria. So for welding, it might be to American Welding Society standards. The number of permissible errors, degree of excellence, or any combination. So really just something that can be measured to know that they did complete complete that performance at an acceptable level. All right, so some tips. Do not use verbs such as learn, understand, know, or study. These are not measurable. So if I say learn the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, I can't measure that. But if I say list the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, then I can measure how well you listed those, if you listed all of them or not. Relate your objectives to practical and usable applications, so make them as real world as possible. And then it's better to overplan than underplan. Always have more than less. Okay, so the more you have, the better. You don't want to have not enough, because then you run through it and you still have time to fill. So overplan as much as possible, because you can always cut back if things are going too long. Do not try to complete or achieve too many objectives, though. So keep your objectives simple, but make sure that you've overplanned for them. All right, so we're going to just go over some examples of, and I'm going to have a lot more listed here than I'm going to cover, so you can go through and look at some more examples later on. So this first one says, while standing from the tape mark, load the dart gun and fire 5 rounds at the target within 10 seconds. All 5 rounds must hit the target. So the performance objective then is, or the performance statement then is, load the dart gun and fire 5 rounds. Okay, so we're going to load the dart gun and fire rounds at the target. That's a performance. We want to be able to do that. The condition statement is while standing from the tape mark. So they have to stand at the tape mark to do this. And then the criterion is they have to do it all within 10 seconds, and that all 5 rounds must hit the target. So if they take 12 seconds, they didn't meet your criteria. If only 4 of the 5 rounds hit the target, they didn't meet your criteria. And so they'll have to redo it or do something different to improve. All right, so another example. Given a commodity area, identify parts of the agri-food industry with no errors. So, performance statement. Identify parts of the agri-food industry. Condition statement. Given a commodity area. So we're going to give them a specific commodity area that they'll identify the parts from. And then the criteria is with no errors. So we'll know that we're going to look at that commodity area, and we're going to have the different parts that they should have listed. And if they don't list all of them, then they had an error and they didn't meet our criteria. All right, so develop a tissue culture, given a tomato plant and the necessary equipment with 75% survival rate. So, the performance objective. Develop a tissue culture. That's what they're going to do. The condition statement is given a tomato plant. So we know that they're going to do a tissue culture of a tomato plant, and that we're going to provide them with the necessary equipment to do so. And then they, in order to know that they did it satisfactorily, we will have a 75% survival rate. So 75% of those cultures will survive. All right, so you can look through some of these others and try to identify the different components yourself. I'm not going to cover them. If we were in class, we'd talk about all of them together, but I don't want to bore you with me talking about it. I think I've given you enough examples to understand what it is. All right, so let's talk about enabling objectives then. Enabling objectives are shorter objectives that support your terminal performance objective. Okay, so they specify a detailed sequence of student activities. So it kind of breaks down what are those components that are going to be taught within your overall performance objective, and it forces the teacher to think those steps involved in completing the task and the performance objective. It forms an outline for your instructional phase and forces the teacher to think through a cycle of questions. So you kind of helps you break down the overall components of that lesson within your performance objective. All right, so here are some examples on how they might be done better. So given the appropriate tools, manual, and a spark plug, the student will be able to gap the plug within specifications in under 5 minutes. So you might want to look up the gap in the manual, and you can remove that in there, remove spark plug, select appropriate wire to set gap using an approved method. All those can help strengthen that objective. And again, you can look at the same thing and see how to better it. But that's basically how to write objectives. If you have any questions, or if you want to write an objective, a performance objective, and send it to me and let me give you some feedback, I'll do that before you have to turn it in. So just email it to me. Now, don't send me all of them. I don't have time to look at all of them and then go back and grade all of them again later. But if you don't think you understand how to write these and you want to get some feedback on one, write it out. Tell me what you think the different components are of that performance objective, and then I'll provide some feedback to you. But that is how to write objectives and what my expectations will be for this course.